Okay, so I'm always saying okay, so I'm always saying okay, so queso. I haven't had queso and chips in a while. So I left off last night. I made a couple of changes, a few things here and there for cleanup. And one of the things that came to mind that game mode and game state don't actually need to specify deathmatch in the name. And the reason why is because I may actually store more game mode within these two objects. So game mode may have like a boolean that says Rocket Arena true or false. It just has like a big list of like team DM, regular DM, and then based on that, I can make a game state do different stuff, run different functions, track for different things. It's a little bit more complicated, but honestly, it's probably all I really need to do. And you can set up anything that you set everything up however you want. So it's just a little bit more robust. So that's changed to that, and I went through, cleaned things up a little bit in different ways on a few different objects. Uh, it feels like I'm doing a lot of cleanup as I'm doing things. The left mouse button one, I didn't mention why I was doing left mouse button rather than action fire, is because I actually do want the left mouse button to be hard coded to, like, when you're a spectator, press left mouse button, unconfigurable will just queue you up or now in a ready state, and it doesn't matter how you bind your keys. Uh, I mean, unless you guys want me to change that, that's pretty much just how I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm kind of considering doing a few other little things, like for example, having to go this far, like to go. Maybe it would have been nicer if I was able to just go straight to, um, yeah, if I was able to go straight to game state, but that would just make it so that I would have one less of these. Right now, you have to go through player state to game state to match spawn. But in a lot of ways, though, it's kind of just a good practice to make sure that certain objects only talk to each other, rather than just having like everything spiderweb talking to each other, um, super willy nilly. All right, whatever. Any sense? Okay, so uh, I said okay, so again. I'll never stop. Right, this seems to be working. And I'm a spectator. I'm a spectator that spawned at one of the deathmatch starts. Deathmatch start can stay deathmatch start. Just using deathmatch starts. And I fucking spawned at the center of the earth. Okay. Alright. How that made sense. And this time it worked. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And that will be fun to figure out. Okay. Simple enough. The length the length of the array is actually one integer larger than the number of objects in the array. So it was picking one of the spawn points that was actually outside of the array. It was picking something that didn't exist. So anytime it picks 4, 4 causes problems and isn't valid and will mess up. So yeah, random integer in range isn't going to work very well unless it's like I don't know what the hell. I think is that a bug? Like seriously, if the array has 4 objects in it, I guess one of them 0 based, but I'm picking an integer between 0 and so I'm gonna have to do something really stupid. Like I'll have to I'll have to do like a branch. If it's not 0, -1. What? Really? That's stupid. Huh. How about that? Well, that's just a weird bug. Okay, so it's like last index was the one that I needed to use. So I went through all that confusion over nothing. That's annoying. So I did another thing as well. I was noticing that game state, as much as I like to have all the spawn points tracked on game state, I was just noticing that the well, for one, for whatever reason, the spawn points might change. There might be new spawn points added. There might This is just totally hypothetical. So speaking in those terms, it actually doesn't make sense to store all of the spawn points in game state anyway. So whenever you're spawning as a player controller, right now, it collects spawn points. The player controller just will go ahead and collect whatever's there right now. Uh, Go to the last index and pick something random, uh, get the location of that object, and spawn the player at that spot. So it's the player controller has a little bit more control over it. It makes more sense to just do it this way. Um, okay. Oh, and with that said, I'm I'm noticing that event begin play runs every time a client connects, which I didn't expect. So I think I'm just gonna try and avoid using end game state event begin play because it seems to run every single time somebody connects to the server, which means that I'm not gonna have the luxury of this thing here. All right, once again, I'm just doing cleanup, but there we go. Okay, so this should work every single time now without an error, and has a lot of room to grow as a function. A lot of these will end up just becoming functions or macros. So okay, so everything seems to be working now. Spawn as player. Name this player spawn. That's gonna break something, but all right. Get all the spawn points. Figure out where the spawn points are located. Pick pick one randomly. Figure out where it's located. Spawn the um, player character at one of those locations. Then possess the object. Then possess the player character. Now here's something that is might seem innocuous at first, but it's actually a really weird big deal. The player's rotation is not handled the same way as actor rotation. All of your rotating is handled on the client. So, and it makes a lot of sense, but you might not be expecting that. So when you have, you actually may want to make sure that you have a function that is just set up. I guess I'm calling it a function. It's an event that is specifically just set up for rotating the player. This will be called when you teleport, when you spawn. There are a lot of different cases where, well, a few different cases where you're going to want to be able to spawn the player and have them facing the right direction and stuff like that, right? So I get the actor forward vector, rotation from vector, feed that into this event just like that, and I make sure. Oh, why is it on multicast? I should be on run on own client. Shit. Now I gotta test real quick to make sure that that's working. Okay, you can go through rotation, and there's a new rotation. This is something that's going to be actually called by a lot of different things. So for now, I'll move it over to a better spot. Okay, yeah, I usually line up all my events like this on 0. So let's just make sure that multicast wasn't something that happened. Okay, I'm facing upwards. Okay, I'm facing the correct direction. I also got rid of the other problem where it was spawning me in outer space. Okay, so good progress is being made, no errors. Um, I am taking into account all the spawn points as they should be, and there we go. Right? Kind of at one of those points where I don't know. I don't really know what I want to do next. So, with that said, there's plenty to do. I'm going to begin working on the character's variables. We'll then branch off into the first time I'm going to do the introduction to the structs. So, alright, character stats. I guess those are just going to roll out as like integers mostly. Hey, so health. I imagine that health needs to be replicated. I'll worry about that. It's better to figure out what needs to be replicated. Uh, I'm pretty sure health will need to be replicated. Okay, got health max. Super health. Uh, together. Health super max. So whenever a character spawns, by default, file this real quick. You always start off with 100 health when you spawn up. Max health is 100, and max super health in Quake 1 is 250. So you can only go over 100 if you grab a super health. That'll be part of the pickup. And I'm gonna just do the rest. Health setup, max health 250. Armor, Uh, I don't think I actually need for this project. I don't think there's a need for max armor. The reason why is Quake 1 doesn't have shards. So um I am imagining though that whoever uses this probably just appreciate the ability to add shards. Shards play a pretty important role in Quake 3. Dare I say more modern. There's nothing more modern about it. Uh, I'll leave it there and I'll make use of it. 200 is your max armor. If somebody wants to add shards, I'm not going to because they're not in Quake 1. So armor class is just going to be an integer, and that's basically 0 represents no mitigation at all. 1 represents 30% damage mitigation, which is green, and 2 will be yellow, which I believe is 50% damage mitigation, and red, which I believe is actually 80% damage mitigation, something like that. I'll have to check those numbers, but whenever you pick up armor, it's going to set to that. It's going to set to that armor class. So if you pick up yellow, if you pick up red, you'll have armor class 3, and the bar will change color to represent what that armor class is. So these are really important variables. You start off with 25 shells, max shells 100, nails you start off with nothing, max 200, rockets start off with nothing, max 100, cells. Boy, they were really like they tried really hard when it came to deciding like the max ammos. It's either 100 or 200 or 100. Uh, and cells are 200. Okay, I think that is act. I think that's actually the player stats, like all of them, unless I'm missing something. Huh. I mean, obviously there are the power ups and stuff like that, but I'm not even gonna get into that yet. So this. Oh, okay. I'll have to have booleans for whether or not you actually possess each of the weapons. So if it's true, then you can switch to it. Okay. All right. Inventory, and I'll add the power ups would probably also go in inventory, but they're just booleans right now. Um, and I'm sure I could probably have done this in a way that's like an array or something like that, but this is actually just easier to look at, and since the game's not very complicated anyway, whatever. So, you always have the axe. So by default, we'll always have these set, but we'll have the ability to turn those off if you so desire. So you don't start off with a shotgun, don't start off with an axe. You just run around with no weapon at all. I took the weapon model off of the skeletal mesh. So right now, on the game, uh, you're pretty much have nothing. Although if you press fire, fire still fires a weapon or fires bullets, and I have to get to that. So basically, these are just true or false, and whenever you walk over a pickup, it sets that to true, and that means that you can now press the number key, and it'll also auto switch to that gun. Okay, pretty straightforward. I went ahead and turned this into a function, and I just call it init references, and that's going to be I'm probably going to all of these down into. So there you go. Init references, and the reason why I needed to do that is because, well, there's other stuff that happens too. When you first spawn, for example, I'll have to have a thing that picks the starting weapon, your shotgun or your axe, depending on which ones you actually have. So there's that. There really isn't a whole lot of else. Oh, I was wrong. Um, it's 30, 60, 80. Those are the damage mitigations. So green is 30, yellow is 60, and red is 80. So I was off. off. But I am correct now, I hope. Also 80 fucking percent. Damn. Okay, wait a second. I was just looking at this. Value range. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. So, I don't actually need to have separate variables for max health and stuff. Well, in this case, I still have to have a max for regular pickups and only allow you to go, but health super max can just be the I could just put 250 here. So what? Does this work that way? I mean, that makes things even simpler. And hell, I probably don't even need. Huh. Weird. So do I not need to have all these crazy very extra things? I don't need to have max shells and stuff, and armor class can be set to from 0 to 3, or would that be 2? 1, 2. Yep, it's 3. Okay, so shells can be 0 to 100, and nails are 0 to 200. Oh man. Well, this reduces the number of variables I need. I kind of wish I noticed this when I was working on the RPG, because that like cuts the number of variables in half. I don't need to have any of this shit. Wow, that's so much nicer. Okay, well, there's that. Okay, so now that I got the stats set up, I guess that's the majority of things that are going to appear on the HUD. Looking at the reflex HUD, which go. All right, health on the left, armor on the right. Really simple, semi-transparent. Okay. So with that said, the way I have the HUD set up right now is that it's going to have to differentiate automatically between whether or not you're currently spectating or if you're a player character, right? And I just want to have one simple function. I may have two, depending on how quickly it needs to be updating. One very dirt simple function that just gets called by any object that changes any of those stats on the player, just calls it and then updates the entire HUD. It's kind of messy in that like if I it refreshes even like how much ammo I have when I take damage, but it's really simple to do it this way. And the inefficiency shouldn't really be that big of a deal because we're not updating every frame or anything weird like that. It's just going to have to go through all of the variables on the player. When one thing changes, uh, it it just refreshes the entire like all of them. Okay, so custom event, refresh HUD, and of course this never needs to be replicated. This never will. And since I'm doing a cast, basically it just get owning player pawn. If this cast is successful, then I know that it's a spectator. If the cast is successful for this, I'm thinking it'll work that way. I guess we'll have to find out. Okay, so I did the same thing with the player character on the spectator. So it's init references. Go in and get that. So now it's the now I have references to the HUD and the player controller when this object spawns. Um, and with that said, first things I want to do once that is assessed is hit the HUD and then it's the correct object. I want to get fresh HUD. Call function refresh HUD. Ow. Okay. Now in the HUD, just for debugging, basically, I have you are a spectator or a spawn character. Got it. So same thing again. Character out of this reference HUD get fresh HUD. All right, nice and simple. Now let's see it fail. It failed. Oh no, I'm a spawn character. I guess maybe when I was a spectator, it didn't give enough time. I have to put a wait or something. Okay, so progress. Okay, so I got stumped on a couple. I said okay, so I got stumped on a couple of weird things. It's working now. So it starts off. It knows that you're a spectator, your spawn character, all right, and there's no errors. Okay, so a few things happened. So the first thing that happened is that I forgot that on the player controller, I never actually got the reference for the player pawn because the player pawn doesn't exist yet. So in init references, the player pawn doesn't exist. He's not. He's not something that matters at this point. So what I have to do is when the player uh, spawns and they go through all this process of possessing the pawn and all that jazz, um, the player character does an event begin play, it, gets his own references, so he knows what the player controls like that, and then from the player controller, I run a function called um, get player pawn, and that sets this variable to that player pawn. So now I know who my spectator is. I know who my uh, character is. So there was one other bug, and I had to be really explicit about this. I got rid of all the old stuff. Are a spectator or a character. So player controller, and I just check versus what is currently the player pawn. I need to do this because the HUD's going to be different depending on whether or not you're a spectator or a character. So one last problem that I kept running into was, and it's something that's kind of been lingering for a little while, is this is it saying that I have like an invalid reference or a null reference or something like that? So whenever I'm referring to the HUD, like here, I have to make sure that I have a switch has authority remote, because whenever you have one of these base nodes, it does both the client and the server at the same time. You have to keep that in mind. So if you have something that's like event begin play actually happens twice. It happens once for the client and once for the server. And I don't know, this is pretty sketchy. I don't know all the details on it, but it happens enough that you have to be aware of it. Because even the pressing of a button will actually happen more than once. Once for the client, once for the server, and it causes all kinds of weird replication problems. So anytime I was referring directly to, after coming off of one of these, if I'm referring to the HUD has no recollection of what's going on the server, right? It's only it only exists on the player, so I have to make sure that Switch has authority remote only. So that got rid of the errors, and it seems to be working now. So exactly, uh, now that I know exactly what the player is, spawns, now I'm gonna have to start working on what the HUD actually looks like, and I'm gonna pretty much go off of this or some variation of something that's a little closer to Quake 1. So like the weapons will be up top, health on the left, armor on the right. Bam. Okay. Here. So I have set up where if you're spectating, you'll have this little thing on the bottom here, and of course it'll be like press left mouse to spawn, or it'll actually probably have to see what game state says, like you can't join right now until match is over, like if you're in Rocket Arena or something like that. So I have that turned off. All right. Now here's the regular HUD, and so this is like your ammo for shotgun shells, ammo, nail gun, nails, um, ammo rockets, ammo cells, armor, uh, the, an icon for the weapon you currently have equipped. This makes it so that it's not really out of the question for you to be able to play without having a weapon model drawn on the screen. If you so desire to do that, it's pretty easy to hook it up so that um, you can depend on just seeing this icon on the bottom. This right here is a bar that shows the percentage of ammo for the currently equipped gun. So like it fills up this way from center to um, either end. So if it's full, it'll look like this, and if it's nearly empty, it'll look like that. Um, and your health. So basically, all I gotta do at this point is uh, is hook these things up, the variables. So here, I'm currently spectating, and if I press that, I spawn in. I'm jumping around. I got my indicators. So anytime any of these indicators equals 0, that means that they'll just be invisible. So right now they're all drawing, even though, but it's fairly easy to actually hook up the logic to just make them invisible when there's no reason for them to be there. All right, I can go ahead and hook these up, and then I'll be done for the night. All right, well, it's really tired. It's all hooked up. So the things, one, this this fact drives me insane. I wish I had known about this very, very time ago. See, one of the big things when it came to updating the HUD was always having to actually go and tell the HUD when to update. Well, it turns out that if you do the whole thing where you grab the reference of the pawn, once you do that, all you have to do then is just click on one of these and go create binding, and it just pulls directly from the reference. In other words, it does everything completely automatically. It's not necessary for me to have to update anything. I don't have to specify anything. All it does is I just have the reference that I need, and that's it. I was doing so much random garbage making sure that the HUD would get all the variables when all I had to do was just pull the reference directly and then just create a binding. So all these objects, all these different HUD elements, they're yeah, they just work completely on their own without having to do anything special. That's it. That is ridiculous. That means that this is going to be 10 times easier to do than and fuck my RPG project. I probably shouldn't even release it now because of this. And the other thing I learned is if you look at the shotgun shells, you can see because they're a negative number. Uh, Earlier when I messed around with this, I was playing around with the value range. Yeah, it's bullshit. It doesn't work. Shotgun shells value range is 0. There's no clamping. It's not doing anything. So you still have to have variables for the max value. Oh well, that's certainly not the end of the world, especially since now that I know that like maybe 60% of the blueprint work was totally unnecessary for like all my previous projects, making sure that the HUD was getting updated properly and stuff. Well, once again, I work on something new and it completely invalidates everything that I've done so far. Okay, I'm done for the night.